Welcome to the nextTalk podcast. We are a nonprofit passionate about keeping kids safe online. We're learning together how to navigate tech, culture, and faith with our kids. I'd like to introduce you to our operations manager at nextTalk, who's normally behind the camera and handles all of our programs, oversees all of our programs. Her name is Merideth Zingelmann.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
How does it feel being in front of the camera?
A little awkward, but I do understand how everybody feels now on this side of it. Usually I'm not even on the editing side. I'm just on the review side. So I even get to see it after our podcast manager does her magic. So
yeah.
It's
kind of weird being here.
It is a little weird.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining us. I have been thinking of this show for a while. Because I have raised an athlete who is now a senior and graduating. So we're finishing up that chapter. But we get calls and I get questions from parents about my kid wants to play college sports or my kid is in the middle of this. Do you have any advice for me? And I'm always like, get on the phone with Merideth because she has all three of your kids have played college sports.
Yes. And
they're grown and she just has a beautiful family. And so I wanted you guys to meet her and hear some of her advice. But first, before we get into all of that, I want you to kind of introduce yourself a little bit more.
Just a little bit. It's not the easiest part for me, but I'm Merideth and my husband and I have been married 30 years. He would like for me to give a shout out that our kids are all athletes because he was an amazing athlete at his 2A high school in Rogers, Texas, growing up. But anyway, you can cut that if you want to. I have to be funny in it or I'm going to drown. But
so we're giving a shout out to the husband, also saying 2A.
Also 2A. But he did play every sport in both ways of all sports and all those things. But anyway, we've been married 30 years. We have 3 awesome kids, grown adults. They're great kids. And I love sports. I love talking about sports. So when you asked me to do this, I was like, yes, but I hope I say what I want to say and get it the right way. So I'm honored. I'm honored to work at nextTalk and help families navigate through all the different things that come at our kids and families. But I really feel a big heart for student athletes and for parents of athletes and coaches. And I just feel like the sports community and the sports world is just a very special place. So I'm honored to talk about it.
Well, and she's been my go-to mentor through this journey because our son, who's the baby, was the first athlete and we really weren't athletes. So it was a whole new world
for sure
to Matt and I. And she's just been a wealth of information on calming me down and saying, don't call coach, don't do this.
Well, I'm not an athlete myself. I mean, I ran track and cross country and I wasn't raised an athlete. I had friends that were athletes. I was a little bit envious of them and I've cheered for them and was a cheerleader. And I remember going to one of them. They were like at state in volleyball or something. And I remember thinking, why in the heck am I over here cheering? Not cheering. It's amazing. But I remember being like, I wish I was playing. And so that little influence kind of influenced me when I was parenting my girls because I was kind of like, get in there and play and see what you think of it. Do all the things, But it is a special place, especially having a senior. You're coming to the end of it. So it's a nostalgic time on your heart. So it's a good time to ask me to come on. And I wish I had a big answer and like my spiel was going to be like how to get you that big NIL deal or how to play Power 4 sports. That's actually not what we're talking about today. So if you tuned in thinking it was that, maybe it's the wrong podcast. But for us, like raising kids that are athletes and raising successful kids was more about the community and the family and the successes as our family grew around sports and what sports did for us as a family unit, whether we look back nostalgically and happy and laugh about it all and the good times we had around sports, not just high school sports or college sports, but even sports in our backyard and on the street and playing when they were younger. And so that's kind of the avenue I look at, like how to maintain the relationship and how to grow your family through that and to parent through it because I would like to say I had all those solutions and the perfect way to do it right off the bat. But after 20 plus years of watching my own kids play, I have a little bit of insight, but
I know you're
No,
passionate. I know you're
no.
passionate about this subject.
Yeah, I do.
So first of all, I want to clarify. You have 3 kids, 2 girls, the
Mhm,
oldest, and the boy is the youngest.
Correct. Mhm.
So I just want to clarify that.
For sure.
When did you guys start, and what was your mentality? Like, were you always thinking, okay, my goal here is to get them to play college sports? Like, tell us
Great
about
question. Our goal was just to be in a community. Like we were all going when they started. We had some friends we met through church. They loved sports. One of the dads was going to coach. I think it was soccer that we started with. And, did we want to join the team? It was just that kind of situation. I guess we had some Saturdays open because we were like, let's sign up and do that on Saturdays. And I remember it's funny, we were going to start out, I think my oldest was 4 at the time, and she saw the uniform and just vehemently refused to wear black shorts. Like, no. And so I was like, okay, well, then we're not going to play. And she was like, okay, then I'm not going to play. And we didn't play. So that first year, we just were like, y'all go play and have fun. And then when she started asking to do those kinds of things with her friends, then we went in. So it was pretty young. I mean, I don't think that there's a set age or that people should feel behind if they're not doing sport activities like that. For us, it was just around our community, and we really liked it. We really enjoyed it. As soon as the little sister could join, we did it that way. When my son got older, to where if we could ever arrange to have them on the same teams, we always did, because it was just fun. Even that meant some were playing up or some were playing with boys or that kind of thing. We always did it. We would just try to see how we could get the family together and the community together, and we did sports around that. If that makes sense.
I love that the goal wasn't to be like, at 4 years old, you're going to be a college athlete.
Oh,
that
yeah,
wasn't the goal at
No.
all. The goal was, we want to find community, get out, be active, compete. You are a competitive family,
Yes, we're a
because of
competitive
your
family.
husband and all the sports.
Yeah, all the sports.
in
Yeah.
in his athletic career.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
And so, and I also think it's so good to, like, when they're young, how important is it for them to try all different kinds of, like, don't hone in on what you
For
like.
sure. Well, my husband and I, we weren't superstars at one sport. Like I said, I didn't play sports. I watched a lot of football. That's what I grew up watching with my dad. I loved watching football on the weekends. We watched NFL teams. We had our team. I'm from the McMahon era, and it was a thing with the Super Bowl shuffle. I was into it all. So I didn't really have a big picture of all the different sports that were offered for youth, but if the kids wanted to try it and we could work it in, we did. And I mean, it ranged anywhere from gymnastics to karate to swimming to soccer to volleyball to, I mean, just kind of whatever. Now, I'll say that in the sense that you can expose your kids to all kinds of different sports without having to participate in all those things. A lot of parents grew up playing a sport, so they play it with their kiddos outside. I highly recommend that. Like playing, with YouTube around these days, we talk about YouTube as a social media platform, but it's also an educational platform where you can be exposed to so many fantastic sports or fun drills to do with your kid, that type of thing. So yes, we played a lot of different sports and a lot of activities, but again, we kept them based off of friend groups and community. I highly recommend any inexpensive routes you can find like that, like neighborhood swim teams, fantastic at skills and learning how to be safe around the water, that type of thing. That's really what we spent the bulk of I would say the elementary school days on, was just exploring different sports, finding out what we liked, watching sports. I cannot encourage you enough to watch sports with your kiddo. If your kid likes going to soccer, start watching soccer games on TV. Highly recommend all of the school sports. Like if your kid is a baseball player, start going to high school baseball games. Same with basketball. Get to know the school that you feed into. A lot of them offer, like, they need ball kids, or they need, they'll do like an elementary school night at your high school. Mm-hmm. Go to those. It's super inexpensive to watch those teams, and the concession stands are super inexpensive also, which I love. Mostly run by volunteers in the community. So you can really learn a lot about all the sports by watching the sports years ahead of you and your community. I mean, if you know you're going to stay in one area for sure, definitely that's where you should be on Friday nights, is trying to see what are their sports like. And it tells you a lot about how much your kid likes it, if they like to watch it, and then they like to emulate what they see.
Well, and I was just kind of thinking about, as you talked, I know when your kids were younger, like cell phones weren't a thing. When your kids were really young and you were doing all this stuff.
Well, one of them anyway. The youngest had them. I mean, the youngest was there, but the older one's not.
Yeah. So now, though, with the shift, with Jonathan Haidt, we followed his. What a great way to be more outside, be more active.
For sure.
It's a way also you're building community with your people. Your kids are learning different sports, different things they like and don't like. And you're keeping them off screens.
For sure.
They're being more active.
I don't know his exact data on it, but he did cite it in his book discussing athletes and screens and how they don't see some of the same patterns, mostly because of the time. They don't have the time to be on their phones as much as.
I think that he said sports and faith families, because both of them have time set apart from screens.
Right.
And I love your idea too of like, go to the Friday night games of your feeder school, because that helps your smaller child set a goal. Like, I want to be on the high school team.
For sure.
I remember I had a coach one time told my son when he was younger, and he said, son, if you make it to senior year and you're one of 12 or 14 men on a team, that's a huge accomplishment.
For sure.
And now my son's a senior and he's on the team, and we keep coming back to that.
Right.
Wow, what an accomplishment that you have worked really hard to get here. And even though it's ending and it's bittersweet, it's also like a reward for all his hard work.
Absolutely.
So the goal setting, I think, is huge in sports.
It is, and like you can become a fan of that school and that environment, whether you end up playing that sport or not.
Yeah.
I mean, we have pictures of my kids, and we were fortunate enough to grow up in the same neighborhood. My kids, we were always there, but they would go to the games and take a picture with the mascot when they're younger. And to me, one of the things with school sports especially is that sense of community. And college sports, it's a sense of community. It just gives you a sense of belonging that's outside of yourself and outside of your family. One thing that was so great about being with your community is that you could see kids grow up, or my kids would see older kids and see them have success. And we learned to celebrate other people's wins and other people accomplishing their goals and kind of walk ahead of what that looked like, the other folks. And I mentioned like summer league swimming, if you have a neighborhood basketball team, if you have a neighborhood soccer team, those kinds of community-based organizations where you're having fun together are just so great. And that's really kind of how it started for all of us. We didn't really have any intentions necessarily of it going, even really knowing that it would go on in through high school. It was really just about making friends and kind of putting our roots down here in the San Antonio area and celebrating being outside and being together and the families having fun, or inside playing basketball or volleyball. But it was just to experience exercise and kind of have a community. And that's really how it all started.
So it started that way. But eventually your kids are really passionate about one sport, and you're thinking they could play college. They do want to play college. That's a goal of theirs.
Right.
So when that starts happening, tell me about year-round sports, because that's a controversial topic, I think.
I know it really has become that way. And I think mostly because of social media has so much controversy discussions that it's become controversial. In most sports, as you get to the high school level, the impact players and those that go on and play in college are usually involved somehow with club or year-round sports. Kind of a lot of the negatives on it is that limits kids into playing less sports, like they can't try them all if you're involved in clubs. And that does tend to be true in some aspects. If the child's heart mirrors the opportunity, and you kind of are watching them like, okay, yeah, they seem like they might be pretty good at it, then you could explore into it. You could step into it. Just because you enter the world into club sports doesn't mean it's forever and ever and always, and that's how it's going to be. Our family really tried to focus on seasons. I had different kids, tried different club sports. It's not the ones they play in college, but they still wanted to experience that sport at a different level. You have to really play out whether or not it's beneficial for your child. There's some really fancy, high-level travel, best of the best teams, but if your child isn't going to be playing, they're going to be mostly sitting the bench. Is it really what you want? There's a lot of great club experiences. And in the same sense, you don't want to be the one on the bench, but you also don't want to be the one that's playing every minute and not challenged by your teammates, which is another aspect of it. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of negativity that goes into it because it is cutthroat. For us, they were positive experiences. We didn't stay with one club all through all of their playing years. Sometimes we left, and sometimes we went to different teams, and sometimes we moved to a different city. We did all kinds of things. It didn't always work out the way we wanted it to, but we always handled it in a professional way. I would say that families need to realize that it is business. It is a business for the coaching aspect, and it should be approached that way with your kiddo, I believe.
Okay, so we're talking a lot about sports, which is awesome because there's so many amazing life lessons that you get from sports. And I've seen that in my son. Amazing. But I can already hear some people digesting this show. Mm-hmm. And I know you. I know that you've kept your kids grounded in the faith. Mm-hmm. And this was a major component in your life.
For sure.
But there's reels out there on social media that will say, don't do sports, get your kid. And you've seen it, you can't take soccer to heaven, but you can take your kid to heaven.
I like it.
So
you can do both.
This is what I want you to speak into. I want you to speak into this idea of if we do club sports or if we do this, how does it not become our God? Because it can become an idol in your life. Mm-hmm. Give us some practical ways that you maintain the balance through the years.
First of all, I would say from the outside looking in, it might appear a lot of times when you look at people's schedules that their God might be something different than God. And that is something as a parent of an athlete, I thought about a lot. And I think a lot of parents do, where you want to find a balance. You're trying to help them achieve their hopes and dreams. At the same time, you're like, where do we belong? Like, where should we be? For us, we were able to intertwine our faith with the activities, and it worked out for us. Do I still wonder sometimes? Maybe we should, I wouldn't say I have any regrets, but you make the best decisions you can at the time and you move forward. And that's what we did. There were a lot of things that we did to incorporate our faith into our daily lives. And so there was never a time where the Zingelmanns are at church and that's when we're with God. The Zingelmanns were with God all the time. And that was very intentional on my husband and I's part. It wasn't a one way or another way. Now, I'm not saying we're perfect, and I'm not saying we all got it right all the time. But the intentions of us were to weave our spirituality into everything that we were doing. Now, my kids did network and go to faith-based events outside of Sundays. They were involved in other activities, Young Life, youth groups at churches, and that helped along the lines of that also. We did something called home church, which was just something I thought of one day when we all came in and had missed church and we were all at different activities and karting and going back and forth, which was basically everybody go up to your room for 15 minutes, bring church to the kitchen table. And that stuck. My kids really liked it. They could come and they could bring anything. We had to tie it in with our faith and with God. But it didn't necessarily always have to be a Bible story, and it would be different types of stories. It started when my son was really little, and we kept it going through the years. Even after one went to college, she would FaceTime into it. Once COVID hit and we were all kind of back home together, it was different. But that really brought church around our time frame. Now, it wasn't in a building, but it was a way for us to keep grounded in our faith, talk about what we believe, and talk about how that related to what we were going through currently. I do understand the concern of giving your money and your time and your everything to how it can look like it's your God. I do understand how people say that. I think that the reels are a little mean because they're generalized. I don't feel like anything where it says all are and none should is necessarily the right fit. for everybody. For us, my children were all raised intertwining the sports with their faith. They were able to live them out daily, and it was something that we talked about. We prayed before every game. We have scripture that we prayed over athletes. Luke 2:52, grow in wisdom and strength in favor of God and loved by many. That was what we wanted to be on our teams. We wanted to be strong. We wanted our teammates to love us. So we kind of intertwined it all with our daily activities. I don't know if that answers your questions.
No, I think it's great. And now I feel like when your kids were younger, we didn't have this, but now since like we have online church that is makes it, I know for us doing some traveling here in the high school years, online church has been great that we'll watch in the car, as we're traveling or whatever.
Right.
And then also just you can visit other churches. I think it's great way to visit other churches in other areas.
They met a lot of kids that went to different churches.
Yeah.
And that's one thing you saw in sports, your teammates, maybe kids were going through confirmation. And so they were like, what's that? And they would learn about things like that. Which they may not have had we not met them in those kinds of intimate travel team settings. The other thing I was going to say that I think is super important is not just online church, but like online church, but then discuss it together as a family.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that kind of set us apart is the things that were going on. We talked about a lot as a family, like, oh, I saw such and such during the game. What do you think of that? How did that happen? What was your response? Or what did coach say? But what did you think of it? What was your response? And delving that just kind of in more than just playing a game and then you win and you go get ice cream. We just dove in head first to so much of it, realizing that they're spending a lot of their time on it. It grows their character. So you've got to pour into how you want the lights to shine out of it.
Well, it's discipleship. But you're using sports, you're using their environment to talk about their culture, things they're hearing, seeing. It's nextTalk stuff, really, if you think about it, right? I love that. You guys have been such a family of open communication and talking through things as they've grown. So I love how you paint a picture of church doesn't have to be a building. Like we're doing that every day. We're talking about how this situation over here, what does scripture say about that? You're doing that in the car. You're doing that on the way to practice. It's a normal rhythm in your life. I love that answer. Let's talk about, varsity sports. We're here. Give us some advice because I will tell you, I'm going to be honest with y'all. It's way more competitive than I ever imagined. And even as I remember watching my son play as a freshman, and I remember my husband and I saying, there's no way he'll play varsity. Like we're going to exit. This is like a lot. And here we are, senior year, and he's playing varsity, right? And it's been such a great experience for him. The brotherhood on the team, the faith is very integrated. And I do like what you say too. You said earlier, like you're not married to that team. You're not married to like a club team or whatever. And I think also like if faith is really important and they're around a group that you're like, oh, I don't know. Like it may not be the right fit for you because you may want your kid to be influenced more over here on this club team where faith is more centered or the coach is more faithful. Like there's lots of options there that you can watch.
For sure.
And like the influence of the other kids on your kid, right? Mm-hmm. Is my kid able to, and you're going to get that through the conversations. If my kid can hold up to this, or this is a serious situation, I probably need to pull my kid off from this and we need to get with another group.
Right.
But it gives you all those different options to kind of move with their friend group, to introduce them to new people too.
For sure.
Which is a positive, I think.
Mm-hmm. In the club environment, for sure.
Yeah. So then let's go back to varsity, though. So varsity is highly competitive. And give us some advice. If you have parents out there that their kids are, say, entering high school and they're wanting to go the varsity route and play through at least high school.
Sure.
What do you got for us?
Welcome to high school.
It's a lot.
I love high school sports. I still go to high school games even though I don't have a kiddo in high school. I love high school sports in all aspects. And predominantly what we're discussing today are team sports. But if you haven't been to a track meet lately, you really should go to a track meet and swim meets. They're so much fun. But it is competitive. It's people that live in that area one of my girls and I, my middle daughter, we laugh a lot because we'll say, man, that high school team is so good. And she's like, it's just people that live in that area. How did that happen? Because it is your community. So the same people that we would play sports with when my son was in elementary school, we then grew up and they all played in high school sports together. And they're just young men that have grown up and are like, yes, I'll go play. I reference a lot to football because football doesn't have typically a club football. So kids can play other sports when they play high school football. And then they bring in a lot more athletes. A lot of athletes end up playing high school football that didn't have to play club and all those other things along the way. But high school sports, I really have, I think, two main things I would teach parents if I could. And a lot of my conversation comes from preventing a negative, really.
Okay.
I would say enjoy it. That would be one positive. Have fun, even though it's hard, to navigate through it sometimes. The first thing I would teach parents is everyone has a role on the team. And you hear that as a cliche, like, oh, everyone has a role on the team. But I mean it. Everyone has a role on the team. You can go, how earlier I was saying, go to those high school games and watch the bench. And you'll see the kids who really impact a game, even from the bench, or when the coach calls them in, boom, they're jogging out there. Other kids are running off. Like, you can tell the body language and the participation and the fact that they're all involved and all in. We all in our hearts want our kids to be the superstar. It's natural, but they must learn at a very little age and all the way up through college that they are more than their playing time. They are more than that student athlete. They are a child of God. And I was saying earlier how we wove in our spirituality and our faith in God and what Jesus has done for us into our sports. And I mean it. You can go through almost anything in life and sports if you know who you are. And that, to me, is the key. If your child doesn't want to be an athlete at all, who are they? If your child is the superstar, who are you really? You're a child of God. And that has been something that is a huge key because I see so much disappointment in the system when everyone's trying to be something outside of everyone's trying to be something more powerful, or they think is more powerful than the child of God. The sun doesn't rise and set by wins and losses on your teams. The sun doesn't rise and set by NIL deals and who's playing Division I, who's playing Division III, or whether you're all state. The sun rises and sets because the Lord God declares it so. And they brought your child into this world. And finding that space of knowing your value kind of helps you play free. You're going to make mistakes out there. There's going to be kids that are better than you. Every kid that I've ever seen play, and I've seen some really fantastic athletes, have had people better than them. Or they've lost games shockingly. I mean, we saw it in the Super Bowl recently. We see it in the Olympics right now, where you're just like, man, they had it all. But they have to have the grounding to navigate all these different things that come at you in sports. So my first one would be your child has to know their value outside of the sport. Do you have anything you want to add to it? Or?
No, I mean, you said enjoy it, which I think was really good advice because it ends, right? I mean, it ends. And the second thing you said was know your value, know your role, know your value, right? That I'm summarizing that. I want to make sure I do.
Let me loop back in a little bit on the role. So like by roles, I mean the roles and the impact you make start before the whistle blows. People are like, oh, my kid's just on scout team. No, there's no just on scout team. The scout team is hugely valuable to prepare the team for the day. They do all the work ahead of time. And so I would just say to be cautious on diminishing. Yes, so we've done that before, diminishing any roles because it's a role. It's invaluable.
I love that you said that. And I believe, tell me what you think about this. I think the sooner a kid realizes where their gifting is on that team, the more successful they'll be.
Exactly.
Because they can improve maybe something they're not as good at, But your real gifting, and you can work with a coach on that, and you can get better at that. But your real gifting, where you shine, is right here. And your team needs this skill set.
For sure.
And that is gold, no matter what it is. Scoring points, defense, where you're not getting some of those, as many touchdowns and the limelight and that kind of thing.
O-line kind of work.
Yes. Very important for them to know their role and how critical it is.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. The second thing I would say is for parents is to love your team. Sometimes this is hard because the way your child's role on the team sometimes affects the way you feel about the team. And if I can say 1,000 times, like I said, there's always teams. I mean, there's always a day where your kid's not the star, even if you're the best kid and you're going everywhere and you're doing everything. Where they've been so successful, you're going to get a turn. Like we make a joke about it at home, like, everybody gets a turn. Everybody gets a turn getting beat when where you get skunked. And you have to love your team anyway. And God loves us anyway. We make mistakes all the time. You drop a pass. You got to love your kid, but you got to love your team. And what I mean by that is, and it's something that I've seen through the years of parents coming to me and asking me questions. And, I show up. I've had seasons where I had a kid injured the whole entire season. I still went to every game. I sat there and cheered for the team. And I literally had somebody ask me why I was there when my kid's not playing. And I said, I love the team. Like, I'm here for the team. It's a difficult shift, especially if you're coming from club sports into varsity sports. It's a difficult shift. But it's super important to realize that your kid is learning that from you and they are seeing you support kids, even if you're not the star, even if you're not the focus. It's your team. I love your team. And that does include the coach. You gotta get in there and be like, well, that's your coach and we're going to love him and he's made by God or she's made by God and we're going to support him. Doesn't mean you have to like everything and life isn't always sunshine and roses, but you have to love your team. And you have to model that for your kids. At our house, we call it buying the shirts because when my son was looking at different colleges, well, he's known our whole lives that we're all in. If you're on a team where that's the color we're wearing, we're all in. That's it's just part of who we are. We're very supportive. So when he was looking at different colleges and where he wanted to play, I would text him while he was on his officials and say, so are we buying the shirts or what? And every time he would just kind of ignore me, well, there's mom texting about, they had those overnights with their official visits. And so it would be in the morning. And I would want to know because we would get to visit the bookstore before we left. So if we were buying the shirts, I needed to buy them while we were there. There's some reason behind it. But when I asked him on the last visit we went to, and I said, buying the shirts, and I'm like, we really want to know, like, what does he think? And he said, yes. It was so cool for us because we knew that he saw we were all in. And to me, it was just like a full circle moment because he knew what I meant. Like, I wasn't like, do you like the school? Do you like the coach? How was admins? It was just like, are we all in or are we not all in? And that's just kind of how we raised our kids in sports. But that's how we modeled. Like, this is our team. This is who we love. This is our family. If somebody messes up at practice or they miss practice or there's something going on, pick them up and pull them back in. We're all in. Wins and losses. You're all in.
I love that. You mentioned your child had an injury and you still went to the games, which I think is amazing. I want to talk for a minute about injuries because my son had some very unexpected injuries through his high school career. And, he went from training so many hours a day to not being able to do anything. And it was in those moments, like, I really had to watch his mental health. I had to watch, again, the value, like, who are you? You're more than a basketball player, right? But it is so critical. And I know we could probably do a whole podcast on this alone, but I just want to encourage parents out there that if your kid is an athlete and they've suffered an injury, it is a critical time for you to pour into them, for their mental health. Watch their screen time because they're going from not being able to do anything and then all of a sudden they're online and they're feeling bad about themselves. They're worried that all their teammates are making progress and they aren't, and they see it. And so there's this panic of, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. And I remember my son's had a couple injuries, but the first one he came back from, we just like praised him for putting in the effort to come back after the injury, because it's really easy to just say, I'm done now. And sometimes it is career ending. But do you have any advice just to speak into injuries? Just pay attention to your kid in
For
those
sure,
moments.
it's probably one of the top 2 worst times of parenting through athletics are the injuries. When one of my girls tore ACL, and I saw it happen, and I just wanted to throw up when I was up in the stands, because I knew what it meant. I knew it meant a year before she would be back, if she was able to come back by themselves. You see a lot of press and a lot of news, and kids can look up their own injuries with other people. And then people are like, oh, Micah Parsons had that and he was back in 6 months. And so you'll probably be back earlier. I felt like we dealt with a lot of that, where you're just like, no, we're not going to be back in 6 months. It's going to be a year.
Yeah.
And I would pour into it in 2 ways. One, I would look for never diminish how they feel about it. Because you can't get stuck in it, but it is a real thing. It's a real loss. It's a loss of their expectations on the season. It's a loss on shoulda, woulda, couldas. It's a loss on all of that. And I feel like validating where they're at with it, and just, man, this is just hard. Like, not trying to fix it. As moms, we're kind of fixers, like, well, let's get you involved in whatever, and then it'll be better. Well, sometimes it's just not better. But don't let them get stuck in there either. Try to get them back with their team as quick as you can, back around the environment, in an environment to get better that is outside and physical as much as you can. I would also say that if they're competitive, which they probably are, find another way that they can win. That was like a funny joke we had. I was like, well, I sat and played 6 games of spades today because she needed to beat somebody. But that's a real thing. They're competitive. And now you can't compete in any way the way you have before. So find another way that they can compete and have that, get in there and, get after it with somebody. But a lot of prayer, a lot of guidance, ask for new avenues to come into their life, God to show them a way to see the other side of it. It's a really rough time. Injuries are tough.
That's a hard journey. And we've seen, teammates struggle with it too. I mean, it's just, it's very difficult. Very difficult. You said, get them competitive. So I just have kind of a fun question for you.
Okay.
Because you guys are competitive.
We are competitive.
Your husband was an athlete.
Indeed.
And do you let your kids win?
Never. Never. Never.
Okay. Tell me about that. Because some people are like, let your kids win, boost their confidence.
Absolutely not. No fake confidence at our house.
No fake confidence. I love
now,
this.
That being said, we found things that they could win at their age. So they may not be able to beat us in a race, or, well, most of them could probably beat me a lot, but earlier than my husband. But at basketball or whatever games we were playing, there was no let anyone win. We would often do teams and break the family up and try to make it even, or we would play games that did not require an athletic ability of size or speed, like Uno. That's the only one I can think of.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, the younger brother was the all-time loser at all sports or all activities, but my husband was adamant about not letting him win. And I can remember being like, but that's so ridiculous. Like, you're bigger and stronger and faster. And he's like, I won't always be. And you're right. He's not always now, because now, we have a picture of the day my son caught him and passed him height-wise, and everything started to turn. My girls, they're tough as nails, and I try to stay out of like swimming pool basketball and that kind of stuff, because I was the referee most of the time, and it's just not anything that you want to get in the middle of.
When you don't let them win, what I have found, because we really didn't let our kids win either, but there was a moment where we couldn't win anymore.
You can't.
Matt and I, we were done, especially with my son in basketball, and so he's stronger, bigger, and it helped his confidence, I think, because
it's a win.
Had we let him win all those years, he would be like, are they letting me win or not?
Right.
But we made him fight for
Well, and they
it.
knew we weren't letting them win.
We made
It
him
wasn't
fight
like
for
we
it, yeah.
acted otherwise. They knew the rules.
Yeah.
They chose to play.
I mean, I guess it's different if they're 2, right? But we're talking like,
well, you got to keep those games age appropriate
Yeah.
too. You know,
Yeah.
races, competitions,
yeah,
ping pong.
Yeah.
You know, that's a good one too. But because there's a little luck,
keep
into
it competitive.
too.
Yeah. Okay, so let me end with this conflict.
Oh,
So conflict with coaches, conflict with teammates. Like I feel like if a parent, because we lots of parents will say, I feel like this coach hates my kid.
mm-hmm.
What should I do? Tell me how you would respond to that. If a parent called you today and said, this is what's happening, you know, should I call the coach? Now, this will probably vary by age,
For sure.
but walk me through this, how you would respond to that.
Well, let's just pretend we're talking about like in the education system, like right in high school.
In high school. So we're in high school, say sophomore.
Okay.
Sophomore.
The first thing I would say is a classic Mandy saying. I would say, give me an example of what you mean. What do you mean, Mike? Because I've never experienced anything that was outside of coaches being amazing people, but there are some examples that you hear about in the news,
Mm-hmm.
and that should always be handled swiftly and quickly. So what do you mean?
Yeah.
That being said, my next question is usually, has your kid talked to the coach? Have you stepped into that space? Have they stepped in and say who, what, when, where, why? Like what's going on? Oftentimes they will say no. And so I usually start with that encouragement. That's what I would tell my kids. I don't understand why whatever's happening. And I would say, have you asked them? And they would say, they don't want to talk to me, or, whatever, what kids say, right?
I'm scared.
I'm scared to talk.
Yeah.
What if he gets mad? And we would talk through based on there's usually been a parent meeting before these times where the coaches have said, if you have any questions, come talk to me. And they say that on purpose. Now, the lesson you learn here is that you still may go talk to the coach, the child may, and not hear what they want to hear, and nothing may change with whatever the issue is, playing time or starting or whatever it is, position you're playing, that kind of thing. But the lesson is in the conversation.
Yeah.
And stepping into a space of where you feel uncomfortable. They're going to need that skill. They're going to need it when they go to college. They're going to need it throughout high school. They're going to need it at their jobs. They need it with their family. Stepping into a space where you're not sure how they're going to respond, but you're of integrity, respectful. Schedule it. Don't just walk up and expect to have their time. You schedule it like a meeting. May I come in and talk to you? I have some questions. Yes, or tomorrow, or whatever works out with the coach. Usually they need a minute to get it on the calendar. Then you get it on the calendar and the kiddo has that discussion. That being said, I never dealt with a situation where a coach wasn't also welcoming to a parent, either as a backup for the kid, to let the kid talk, to be a support system for the kid. There's a lot of talk nowadays that you hear about parents need to stay out of it at the high school level. Yes, I feel like to a degree, the kid needs to take the step first in a learning environment, but I don't think that it's a no parent environment either. I think it's a teaching environment for the child. And I definitely think, and in my experience, that coaches were open to having a conversation with the parents in the same setting. It can't be right after the game.
Yeah.
It can't be when don't
Not
do
in
it
a
when you're
heated-
really mad.
Not in a heated environment.
But that's based on my experience. And I had great experiences with it. And there is a lot to learn in club coaches. I would talk to them to ask them and understand the sports better because I don't know. We would pay trainers to help in a specific position. And I would ask them like, why are you working on that? I need to understand. And they would tell me and I would learn so much. And then I would see it and you can validate that with your kiddo. Like, oh, I see you're trying whatever he taught you. Or, so I feel like there's been this world. And some club coaches right now, if they're listening to this, they're probably like, why is she telling him that? Because there is a world where it needs to be a balance. You can't be in their ear constantly trying to guide and direct it. In my opinion, it's not super healthy. But if your child, they're still a minor. They're still a kid when they're in high school. They're not out on their own. Now, as they transition from high school to college, you're done. To me, I would never reach out to a college coach or ask questions about college coaches or question anything, and it's nothing but, hi, how are you? Thank you. It is, they are adults and the kids need to deal with it in that setting. But in high school, I feel like it's hard to navigate. Kids see things through their lens, their children. And what they're seeing or feeling is very real to them, but it's not necessarily the whole picture. And sometimes a coach can say, well, at practice, I don't see him, stepping to the front of the line and being the first one. Like, there might be more things that can go into it that you don't see because you're not there. And they also have a lot of things going on that nobody can see.
Yeah.
And so
we just see our kid. We don't
only
see the
our
big picture.
kid, and we see how it affects them and we hate it.
Yeah.
Which and so I definitely think with conflict, it's going to happen, and you can enter into conversations. You can even disagree and still model for your family how to respect the different opinion that the coach has, and then be like, but what's your role in all this, Johnny? To work hard, to become better version of myself.
Shine.
And yes,
coach says you are really good here. Let's focus on this. This is your role.
Right.
Yeah. Even though you may not be happy with it, that may be what you need for that team.
If you're basketball, you're not going in, but you keep working and working and working, you're a better basketball player. That is still a very big win.
Nobody can take that from you.
Nobody can take that from you.
No amount of playing time or whatever. You're disciplined, you're learning hard work, and you're getting better.
And you're on the team.
Yeah. I love that answer because I think it's so spot on. Gather the context first. Give me an example of what you mean the coach doesn't like you.
Well, kids will say that to you too. He hates me. Yeah. He doesn't play me. He likes such and such. Give me some examples. And so it's with the kids and parents, like validate. I mean, and how you feel stinks sometimes.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. But I love that you said that first, get the context. And then step 2 is like, send your kid to talk to the coach, schedule a time. Mm-hmm. Coach, I need to talk to you, see how that goes. And then kind of the third step is the parent may need to have a conversation after that meeting with them, but it's scheduled. It's not in a heated conversation.
For sure.
And honestly, if you think about it, that's biblical conflict resolution right there. Matthew 19, right? Where you go to the person first. And so it's so important. I always say this to my kid when I'm pushing them into a conversation with a teacher or a coach or whatever. I'm like, you are going to need to do this with your professors. You're going to need to do this at your job. It's such a skill. And so don't do it for them. But as I love what you said, when they're in minor though, you're still involved.
You got to parent it.
Yeah, you've got to parent it if it doesn't get resolved one-on-one with the kid and the coach or the kid and teacher.
Well, and if you just don't understand, you can follow up.
Yeah.
And coaches, they want to win and they want their kids to be successful. And the way they get to that or don't get to that you may not understand it all, but I never met a coach that didn't wake up caring about a kid, honest to gosh. And so stepping into that space and hearing that from them, it may help you a lot process what you're seeing.
Yeah. So we're talking about conflict with the coach, a conflict with teammates, because there's jealousy. This happens on a team. You may be happy for this person, but you're a little jealous.
Well, and the culture of the world doesn't help with that.
Yeah.
Because
comparison.
Kids every single week in certain sports, kids are getting picked as the player of the week, and such and such got a highlight reel on the news, but right after that, he dropped the ball or whatever it is. I used to joke with a coach friend of mine, and I would say, I just wish there was a way to outlaw any sports for high school kids on Twitter or on X or on the news, because it just creates this want to of them to be out there. Mm-hmm. But that's one aspect of conflict with kids that kids have to navigate through differently now, even more so probably now than when my kids first started in high school. I kind of saw it evolve over the years with Instagram, and TikToks are almost more like marketing tools for the kids. And so people are seeing a lot more of them and they're out there a lot more. So it opens them up to more vulnerability, I feel like, of conflict. We had some cases of conflict even without social media as my kids grew up, and it's difficult. Kids like to be liked. You do. Most of them do anyway. And it's hard to navigate kids that you've grown up with, like on the high school environment, and then something happens and they're not nice, or you're like, what the heck? What happened? I would say that I don't have all the answers to it, and I don't know if I always handled it the best, but I always just tried to be a soft landing for my kids and not offer too much advice, but just kind of listen and let them process it. I found a lot of times 1 minute there would be a big conflict, and then the next minute it was gone and we moved on into something else. Loving them and supporting them as a friend and loving them and supporting them as a team sometimes look different. And always, my kids always called it being, staying in character. Like on your team, you're competing and you're working together, and it's not personal. Any outside conflict coming into the team environment, the game environment is to win the game, and your own teammates shouldn't be your opponent, right? So dealing with the game setting was always one thing, but then everybody going out to eat afterwards and who's included and invited, that's where it can get hard. And you just have to keep them on track of supporting their team and loving their team and working through those friendships would be my best advice.
And I would say too, just from what I've learned, is a lot happens how parents talk about other teammates too.
Yes.
Right? Like if you're saying, I don't like this kid because of what, you're hurting the team because you want your kid to see the best in that player. Yeah, everybody has faults on the team.
For sure.
But everybody shines in a certain way. And so the more you talk about, man, this person's really good at this person's really good at this, you're helping the team culture by reminding your kid what this role of this particular person is on the team.
Sure.
And so I think, parents have to be really careful because we're in our home, we let our guard down, and we may be speaking badly of the coach or another player.
For sure.
And that could affect our kid and how they see the team or the coach.
Yeah. And it kind of needles its way on into the team. And it goes back to loving your team. It goes back to recognizing biblically our words build up. Our job is to support all the kids. I mean, I say all these things not to say that it's all easy. I mean, we all deal with sin. We all deal with struggle. We all love our kids so much, and you want them to be successful. And it gets hard where you're like, comparison is the thief of joy, right? Like you think of all those things, but you've got to really like have a mental switch to enjoy the time that you're watching them play and love their team and value, like build into your kiddo to value themselves as a child of God. And their sport is this amazing extra thing that they get to do because God gave them this ability to run and jump or swim or climb or whatever it is. And to do that for the glory of God, it takes work. It takes practice. It takes acknowledging the fact that you're walking into that, and it's not just something to stay busy on the weekends.
I love how you phrase that because also at the end of the day, every kid, every person is going to have to quit their sport someday, right? I mean, even the NFL players eventually have to retire.
Yes.
And so that identity piece is so important. And it just depends, like, when is your career going to end in this sport?
Right.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I've heard you say before too, everybody thinks college sports is like the finish line.
Pinnacle.
But it's not. You were like, it's the starting line.
It
starts all over.
Yes.
And we've talked before too about the pressure because you're always fighting for starting spot or fighting to maintain your starting spot.
For sure.
And that's a constant at any level.
For sure.
And so the carrot is dangled. And that's why I think it's so important. The identity of child of God has to be when you lose the starting role, when you go back up to starting role, whatever it is, you have to maintain that identity in your child.
I worry about kids. Again, we could have another podcast about this, but I worry about kids in this grab of transfer portal and NIL, all these things today, because it's just got to be more than that. It's got to be like when we were looking at colleges and things, it's got to be where you can grow as a human being, in my opinion, and grow in your faith and be able to be yourself and live out loud in your sport and know who you are.
Yeah.
And I
But
think
that is you weaving in faith to all aspects of the sports, and it's not just about the sports and the trophy and
I
the
think
title.
there's some kids that are going to do it well, and it's going to all, and they are doing it well, but it is always something I think about, and I think, oh, I just hope they know how valuable they are as a child of God in all that they're doing.
Yeah. I think you touched on it slightly there's positive and negatives with social media with an athlete, because I think it kind of holds them to an accountability standard. Like if you want to play in college, your social media better be okay, because they're watching you on social media. So there's also there's like a built-in awesome accountability with that. But the flip side of that is the pressure. The pressure. And so I don't know if you want to speak into that. I just think parents need to recognize there's a positive and a negative.
Another aspect of being an athlete, a student athlete, that you have to parent, I would say. With my son, it was mostly with him is when it became, because, in a short period of time, we saw a big evolution with the phones and the social media. What started out as a fun share pictures with my friends has grown into a full marketing scheme for these young men and women. And so for my son, a lot of his outreach with his coaches, the school he's playing at, he talked to the coach first on Twitter, and so I think that's still the norm. Kids post their film, they post their highlights, all their information is out there. You can tell where you're going to high school, what you play, what position you play, everything. Their NCAA numbers are on there. It's a lot of information. So I would never, ever say that anybody should walk that by themselves. They're in high school. They're also dealing with a lot of other stuff, and they need a parent, logged in with them on the social media apps where they're sharing public information. One, to be a screen for that of what all's coming in, and two, to help them say, hey, what is that school that's talking to you? Or, hey, what was that you posted? Or, hey, I noticed in the news they posted the win of the other team, and everyone's talking about how great the other team was. To me, I used to always tell my children, turn off your phone after a loss. Like, give yourself the space to figure out how you feel about it. In my kid's high school, when my son played, his coach wouldn't let him have phones on the bus ride. Now, that meant a lot of times parents had no idea when to pick up their kids, which was funny because nobody knew when to pick up their kids. But they were able to just be together as a team without the outside influence, even if it was just for a 15, 20-minute bus ride. And I loved it because you need to figure out how you feel about something before you find out how the rest of the world feels about it. And that has to do with whether you're the superstar or whether you maybe messed up in that game and your team didn't win. It gives you an opportunity to sit in it and then decide, okay, I'm okay. I'm okay. And then you can go in to the social media world. I do think when you have younger kids, like on varsity sports, if you have younger kids mixed with older kids, you really need to be paying attention to the influences there, because you could have an 18-year-old turning 19 senior with a 14-year-old that just came from middle school. So I think it's a space that you need to be aware of, and who's giving your kid rides, like all of that kind of stuff pours into it, but the phones pour into it on that sense too, because they might be watching things or doing things or networking in ways that you're not ready for your 14-year-old to. So I think the phone aspect plays into sports a lot, not more than it used to.
And then I just wanted to mention, and I know this, we've talked about this wasn't really a thing when your kids were younger, but I have really noticed a shift in nextTalk probably the last 5 years, I guess, is just phones in locker rooms, boundaries being crossed. And what I mean by that is taking pictures of people changing, bullying, taking pictures in showers. Like, we've been getting calls like that. And I think it's because the world is moving so fast with tech. And one of the things that I'm just trying to digest is we've always had kids changing in front of each other in locker rooms. And of course, there's been abuse, but we haven't seen it on the scale that I feel like I'm seeing it now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of it has to do with what they're watching on their phones. I mean, we talk a lot about pornography here at nextTalk. I think a lot of kids are desensitized to seeing body parts and stuff. And so boundaries get crossed easily, whether it's touch or taking pictures or bullying, those kinds of things we're becoming desensitized to. So I just want to kind of end the podcast. We've got a podcast on boundaries. We've got a podcast on consent. We've got a podcast on pornography. Like, we'll link all of those for you, but don't skip that conversation with your athlete.
For sure.
Because they are in a unique situation where they do get comfortable, and then they're changing in front of each other. And we have to be careful with what they're seeing from their screens, and that we don't want that to bleed over and to be in an abusive situation in a locker room. And we are seeing more of that.
Well, it goes back to teaching them from very little ages. And the reason why you teach it at very little ages is so that when they get in those environments as they age, they remember like boundaries, what keeps me safe, what makes me a good friend and a teammate. What am I supposed to be doing in this environment? I'm here to change clothes and get ready for the next thing. Yeah. And I think changing a lot of the schools to not having the phones visible is helping.
That has helped tremendously. I mean, I've heard from parents who we've helped who have said, I'm so happy with the phone-free schools now because pranks, now I don't have to worry about it in the locker room.
Videoing a prank was a thing.
Videoing teachers even and bullying teachers.
And I think sticking with like trusting what you've taught, right? We've taught you from your little age, you keep your hands to yourself, you're changing, your modesty, doing all the things. And that carries over into everything you do with sports and locker rooms and private spaces and acting of integrity.
Yeah. And being that safe place when they do see something weird in a locker room that causes them to maybe want to take up for somebody or speak up or something like that. Like, you're the safe place constantly trying to help them navigate those things. Mm-hmm. I think that's so important. Any parting words? We've covered a lot, and I feel like we could dive into each of these subjects and do a podcast on each of them.
Whole series.
Yeah. Any parting words for parents of athletes out there?
I would say, I already said enjoy it. But I asked one of my kids, one of my daughters, I said, what if I could say one thing that would, what would you recommend? Like, what would you recommend if I would say if I could do something different or do something else? And she said, save more game film. And I thought that was super sweet because they are constantly looking at their game film, but they don't realize that they're going to want to look at it again 10 years later or later on down the way. And so it's such an easy thing because huddle, like before your season ends, get in there and save some of your huddle film because you're going to want to go back and look at it. On a bigger picture, the question about how your sport can become your God always lingers with me because it's not a balance. It shouldn't be a balance. God is first. But I fell back to thinking a lot about it. And I was thinking, Jesus was on a team. He was the captain. But he didn't walk alone out here. He had his 12. And then now we're called to be all of us. We're all part of that same team. There's not anything in your life that you're typically going to do solo. We're not designed to be solo. And so I just walk the path and still do with my kids with sports of relating it to scripture and relating it to Christ and how he lived and trying to pour into our community and serve others and lead and do your best. And they're all biblical characters. So when I think about, besides game film, my go-to would be like, just try to weave it in as much as you can. Church isn't just something you go to on Sundays where you sit there. You got to take it and try to impact lives with it and impact your family and help your family learn to impact other lives. So that's my takeaway.
So good.
Well, that's good.
Thank you for all your advice. We survive varsity sports because of this one right here.
You have great kids. A
lot of calls in the. I mean, it was just a whole new world for us, and getting personal trainers and club sports and just the research and you. She's always just been a steady try it, and then you can always this could just be for a month, and then you go somewhere else or whatever.
Yeah, you do the best you can with the information you have. You step into
Yeah.
it. You don't look back and say shoulda,
Yeah.
woulda, coulda. And then at the end of the season, you make a new decision.
Well, and there's also been
have
seasons
to.
where my kid has come to us and said, I need a break. Like, I'm burnt
Mm-hmm.
out. And honestly, he would come back better in the fall when he would take a break. And there were some summers that we took off
For sure.
because he just said, I'm done. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't know if he was coming back, but it was his to figure out. You know, it wasn't me pressuring him or anything like that. It's got to be their journey.
It does.
And then, like you said, we're all in. We're team.
We're all
you.
in. Buy the shirts.
Buy the shirts.
nextTalk is a 501c3 nonprofit keeping kids safe online. To support our work, make a donation at nexttalk.org. nextTalk resources are not intended to replace the advice of a trained healthcare or legal professional, or to diagnose, treat, or otherwise render expert advice regarding any type of medical, psychological, legal, financial, or other problem. You are advised to consult a qualified expert for your personal treatment plan.
Our nextTalk podcast is in the top 2% of over 3.4 million podcasts ranked by Listen Notes. But now we're also adding YouTube. So this is a whole new thing we're doing. If you could like, subscribe, and comment on these videos, it would help us so much. We appreciate y'all.